Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I welcome you to the 8th program in our series celebrating the 25 years of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. And each week we're doing this chronologically, and you can see we've done many things with a lot of people in the Northwest. Starting the year 2000, which we are on this program, we had the 15th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. program, children's program, and the title of it was Smile on Your Brother and Sister. We have a different slogan each year, and on that special day, we ask all 1,200 children to sign a signature of pledging their support of human rights and dignity. And you see that on the screen. There were 1,200 of those signatures. Our teachers here do a remarkable job teaching the dignity of all persons to our students. Following that January program, then in February, the year 2000, the North Idaho College Human Equality Club put on a seminar celebrating Black History Month. And at that program, we had the club and people throughout the community come into our campus to teach our young people about that very important issue. Then we move on to April 7th and 8th in 2000, and North Idaho College and the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations and the Human Rights Education Foundation sponsored a two-day teachers program, and Lucy Lipinski, who's with us again today as a board member, will tell us about that conference.
There were 200 educators and students present for that conference at North Idaho College on Friday and Saturday. One of the things that impressed me was Loretta Ross, who is the director of the National Center for Human Rights. She challenged us to identify violators of human rights and passed out the Universal Declaration. There were many fine presenters, and it was an excellent weekend. And
so it was empowering teachers from both Washington and Idaho how they could expand their diversity teachings in the classroom. And there was a joint effort with these other organizations as well as the task force. Then we move on to something else that received more attention than anything that we've ever been involved in. As I told you earlier, in 1998, Victoria and Jason Keenan were assaulted by security guards at the compound on the public road. And 2 years later, that resulted in a civil suit of the Keenans versus the Aryan Nations and Richard Butler, which took place August 28th through September the 7th. Norm Gessel, who's on our board, the former president of our task force, our attorney, led that very successful work with the Keenans that led to that very successful trial that bankrupted and ended the Aryan Nations headquarters in the world. Norm, would you take a few minutes to tell us about, in a very concise way, what the civil questions were and how it turned out?
Yes, Tony. The questions for the jury were very simple ones. Was there tortious conduct and was there negligent conduct on behalf of Richard Butler and the Aryan Nations? And if there was, what was the measure of damage? And if the acts were egregious enough, if the acts were bad enough, then the jury was permitted to add on punitive damages. And on each of those questions, the jury found for the plaintiffs, Victoria and Jason Keenan, and returned a cumulative verdict of $6.3 million against the Aryan Nations.
So there'd be a long process, and there would be a bankruptcy that he would declare, but the end result of that, although he didn't have $6.3 million, I guess the compound was worth about $250,000, the Keenans finally were awarded the property.
Yes, they were.
Now, following this victory, and I happened to be in the courtroom at the moment the jury came back with you, it was a remarkable moment in the history of the struggle against the neo-Nazi movement and hate. Would you give us briefly, as an attorney, and working with Morris Dees and his Southern Poverty Law Center, and Ken Howard here, and there was an attorney, I guess, from San Diego, but you had started at the very beginning with this, and you were the family attorney. And Deanna Gissel, your wonderful spouse, was there. What was your feeling? What was your reaction?
Well, because so much time and energy had been focused on this, and because both sides seemed to agree that the verdict would be an important descriptive element in the culture of the inland Northwest and of the social fabric of the inland Northwest. And a tremendous amount was writing on that decision. If we lost, if the plaintiffs lost, then it seemed as though the Nazis were sure to grow in numbers. And if we won, we were sure that the Nazis would decline in numbers. And so the consequences for all of us was huge.
Well, it would even end the headquarters. I mean, if you got the property, they wouldn't have a place to work from. The other thing I want to point out, and then we're going to show some video, but you need in Idaho in a civil case 9 votes out of 12, and it was 12-0. You won all 12 votes,
right,
and for a very significant sum.
Right, yeah. We can't overestimate the importance of the 12-0 vote by the jury. There was 12 members on the jury, and they all unanimously voted and agreed to the $6.3 million.
Yeah, that's very significant. Yeah. Wish we had more time. We're going to go now to video, and Norm, you were present. You had a press conference with Morris Dees and the Keenans all that very afternoon to get your reaction to the victory, and we'll show that video now, a little portion from it.
And I can tell you now that we intend to enforce this verdict. We intend to take every single asset from the Aryan nations now and forever. We intend to even take the name Aryan nations and hopefully through the judicial process close that sad chapter in this history of this nation. And I think this jury said loud and clear with its $5.1 million verdict against Richard Butler that they saw him as the cult leader.
In my mind, these people are my heroes here today. It hasn't been an easy 2 weeks without the community and the support of my family. I couldn't exist on this stand here today without the cooperation of the Sheriff's Department and the local law officials for our protection, and them, I'm grateful for them. I guess all I can say is, justice has prevailed, and yes, we have won.
Well, that was one of the victims, Jason Keenan, and what a remarkable experience that was for him. And Norm, I guess I could say, we have to move on, but I could say that you've attended a lot of press conferences. That's the most important one you'll ever attend.
Absolutely.
With that, we want to go to Lucy Lipinski again from our board. Norm would want us to do this, but we'll do it anyway. Following this great victory, he was so rightly honored with 2 great awards in November of 2000. Would you tell us about those?
I sure will. One of the awards was the YMCA's 2000 Carl Maxey Racial Justice Award. Coretta Scott King, a woman who knows about danger, was there to present as the keynote speaker. And also, Morris Dees stated that the suit against the Aryan nations and Richard Butler would not have been possible without the long-term leadership, foresight, and courage of Norm Gissel. There was another award given, and that was the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce, the Distinguished Citizenship Award for this same act. I think that the community at large does not realize how many times over the years the gentlemen that I'm sharing the table with today have had their lives in danger, and what a commitment they've made to human rights in our community on all of our behalf.
Thank you, Lucy. And Marshall Mann, from one of the original members and still on the board of the task force. Marshall, among your many talents, you have been a salesperson for human rights. And one of the things that you have promoted on behalf of the task force, and it's been very successful, is what we call posters and all. Would you share a little bit what your concept was with that?
Well, it was to promote human rights throughout the state. We started way back when, in the early 80s. Skip Cook designed our first poster. This poster that you're seeing right here was one that we did in 2000. And this said that Idaho, the human rights state. And we tried to sell that. We sold it to the community. In fact, we had, well, we'll get to that in a little bit on the reader boards, but we had this sign put up in all homes and businesses and everywhere. And we tried to sell that idea to the state. It didn't go quite. I'd like to see it put on the quarter. We didn't get that far, though.
Or on the license plate, I know.
And the license plate. That would have been good.
The posters and the bumper stickers and all kinds of literature have saturated At one time, there was even some billboards, and you get credit for that because you believe and know that you have to go public, and it has an incredible psychological impact. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to the year 2001, and as always, we start out the year. This was the 16th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Children's Program, A Time for Peace. It was held on January the 12th at North Idaho College. Again, 1,200 children were there from the 5th grade. And then we move on to following the 2000 trial and victory, taking over the compound in 2001. And the Aryan compound was sold to the Keenans on February the 13th, 2001. And guess who was in the courtroom with them? It was Norm Gissel, their family attorney. And I recall, Norm, of your discussing going out on the steps of the courthouse on that great day when there had been justice for your clients. And tell them what you shared with me about how you understood why you'd become an attorney.
Well, there was the every attorney has some sort of aspiration or goal, and my aspiration and goal as an attorney was to participate in something as consequential as this series of lawsuits that was the Aryan Nation lawsuits, including the bankruptcy. And it was for me personally, it was, which is not the reason to do something like this, by the way, but for me personally, it was a culmination of a legal career. But it was more important was that it was another way of addressing the culture and the great people of the inland Northwest and describing to them that this Aryan Nations cloud that had covered so much of our lives for so many years was lifting.
They've already put up on the screen there, and they might go back to it if they can, following your winning of that. And Greg Carr came in the picture, a wonderful man who was born in Idaho Falls. And Greg Carr buys a compound from the Keenans in the spring of 2001. And give us a little bit of information about that. So when he bought it, then he owned it, of course, and then your clients got some relief financially. And I want to make it very clear that you and Morris Dees, none of the lawyers took any money.
Right. Yes, this was a pro bono litigation, and what that means in lawyer speak is, or in plain English, what that means is that we took no payment for the hours and hours that we spent on this lawsuit, either before the verdict or after the verdict. And all of the benefit of the judgment went directly to the Keenan family.
Who was very much in poverty. They didn't have any resources, but they'd been so devastated by this victimization that this was at least some relief for them. And then they had contributed by being willing to be clients and stand up for their rights. They and you and Morris Dees and all others involved meant it was an end of this headquarters. And Norm, quickly, we don't have much time, but I believe you've charted through your research that many people came to the compound over those many years and heard the hate and left there and committed crimes. Would you briefly mention about there's a lot of felonies committed?
Right. We calculated at several different times people who either shared these Nazi beliefs of the Aryan nations or who had similar beliefs, or people who went through the compound, and that would include Chevy Keogh and Buford Furrow. And there was, over the time, it seems like there was upwards to 100 major felonies committed from about 1983 up through the present time.
Including murders, the number of murders.
Absolutely.
And all kind of other crimes. Now then, Norm and Marshall and Lucy, we've had these great victories. The compound is going to become no longer a place of hate. So we invited Morris Dees, the lead attorney, to come to our annual banquet. We had a huge celebration with over 500 in attendance, and Morris Dees was the keynote speaker. And our great, great friend who had been the president of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations and later the director of the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment came to the banquet. And we're showing some photos now of Morris Dees getting his award at the banquet. And Greg Carr was there, and he got his award for his incredible generosity of buying the compound and turning it into a peace park. It was an incredible evening, and Deanna Gissel, the president of the task force, was there with us to celebrate and to help MC the program. Bill Wasmuth, who's now deceased from Lou Gehrig's disease, gave his final public appearance in which he spoke by giving a prayer at the banquet, and followed by Morris D's keynote address, and we're going to show you little excerpts from that so you can share that evening with us that happened in 2001.
I ask you just to reflect for a moment. What kind of a society, what kind of a community, what kind of a country, what kind of a world do you really want? And what's your vision for that world? I hope that it's a world filled with passion for the ones you love, with passion for justice, with passion for an end to hate.
This is quite a welcome back. I appreciate your kind applause and your kind support, but I want to say right off that this victory was not something that I did alone in any way. This was a victory that started a long time ago by a group of dedicated people in this community who had the seeds planted that made it possible to harvest the victory that we did. But you know, I think if Dr. King was here today, I think he would still have faith in us, because he would see what people like you have done and what people like you are going to do in the future. And if he was making that speech today, he might say that I have a dream that one day in the red clay hills of Georgia, I think he might add, on the reservations, in the barrios, in the ghettos, and in the seats of economic and political and judicial power in this nation, that the sons and daughters of former slaves and the sons and daughters of former slave owners, and today, Dr. King might add, the homeless, the powerless, the poor, and those who hold the keys to the economic and political and judicial power in this nation will sit down around the table of personhood and truly learn to love one another.
Well, that was a very touching banquet. We've had banquets every year since 1998, but it's really hard to top that one with the celebration. It was a bringing to a conclusion, bringing people together to celebrate the court victory, the end of the compound, and moving forward with the peace part. And Morris Dees gave a great speech, and Bill Watson with a great message, and of course there were others. Greg Carr spoke and was also eloquent. Also in the spring of 2001, things were moving rapidly, and Greg Carr called, and he'd purchased the compound a little earlier in the year, and he hired a company to come in, and I had the privilege of working with his construction company, and we decided that we would remove everything from the compound. And the way to start that was we invited the media from all over the United States and even other countries, and he brought in a team to do the taping and even a helicopter, and we wanted to show the world that the compound was coming down. And we were all there, the people here and many others, and we decided to tear down that 40-foot tower, and then the building that had the swastika, the concession stand, and then the guardhouse. And so it was a remarkable day. We have much tape on that, but we're going to show you just a small segment of how this went around the world through AP Ware and others and television stations. And here's how we started the beginning of the end of that physical facility, the compound. Well, ladies and gentlemen, most of you could not be with us on that remarkable day, and that's great about video. We can capture it, and you did get to visit and see what happened. And again, to Greg Carr, many thanks for bringing in a crew so we could have a recorded history of that, and he did that through the Gregory C. Carr Foundation. And I also want to thank Deanna Gissel, the president of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. She also provided these photos that we're using. She's a great photographer, and she too has captured for us something very important in history. Then following this, we made a decision, not for a political purpose, but we decided to turn over the compound, Greg Carr did, to the fire departments of our area and to allow the burning of the buildings. And arson divisions came in from Washington, and it was a training exercise. We were going to get rid of it. And I was told by some of those that were there to do that they got more footage, video, than they'd gotten in 10 years while they burned those buildings. And they trained young firemen about how to analyze and to see what happens to cause a fire. And they're using that video today to train police officers. And I told Greg Carr that if we save one life from allowing them to burn that compound and training, then that's another lining in the dark cloud that is bringing sunshine to our area. And so you did see a photograph from the newspaper of that burning, but it was not for a political reason. And then once that took place, we cleaned everything up, and we made it into a peace park. And we have a slide of that, and it's got grass there now where you see that. And it was given by Greg Carr to the North Idaho College Foundation. It must be kept for 20 years, and it is a place where people can go and reflect, and classes from North Idaho College can go, and such as political science class, and talk about what equality is rather than hate. So tremendous victory, and we're so grateful to so many people for this to happen. If time permits, we will, I think it's going to, before we go back to Marshall, and one final thing, I want to get particularly Marshall and Norm's reaction as someone's been involved so long, and they were there that day. Marshall, we'll start with you. What were your feelings like when you saw what we just saw on video that day when you were there?
When I was there that day, that's the only day I ever went up there. I
Yes.
had real hard feelings about that. It was not a comfortable place for me. And it was a good feeling seeing the stuff come down, that's for sure, and getting rid of the hatred that was up there.
But you must have had many emotions that day.
Oh, I did.
It's hard to express those sometimes.
It really is hard to express, but that day was a great day. It
And it's
was a
important
great
for
day
you-
for human rights, it was a great day for Idaho, and it was a great day for the world.
It was important for you to be there. And Norm, going through the trial and all these other things coming, and I noticed that you and Deanna both were very quiet as you were watching this. Can you share with us some of your reactions?
Well, it was what was important about it was at so many levels, and as you coined the correct phrase, that this was a campus of hate, and that campus was closed, and almost no greater thing could have happened at that moment in time for all of us than the closing of the campus of hate. And it was the realization that our years and years of struggle, and at times dangerous struggle, that we all were involved in, bore such remarkable fruit. And that the faith of the citizens of the inland Northwest was justified in their support for us over years.
It all came to a head at that time.
Absolutely.
I talked to an AP Wire reporter that day and said, this is a campus of hate that we're closing. I was so lifted the next day when the headlines in the Chicago Tribune was, campus of hate closed. I think that said it all. Marcia, we have one more thing to talk about in the year 2001, and that is, again, your contribution on dealing with advertising. You came up with the idea that to get the whole community and all the towns around to use their reader boards for something that dealt with human rights. Share that with us.
Well, Idaho, the human rights state, we thought was a great slogan, and we took that slogan and we had we went to almost every business in town. We had over 100 businesses participate with the help of Julie Anderson, myself, and a couple of other folks. We got over 150 businesses to participate in that, and I only was told no by one business that didn't want to do it, and the reason they didn't want to do it, they said they don't do anything political. And I don't know, I never looked at human rights as being political.
But see, that shows the power of the work, and it shows the unity within the community. And this has been so successful because year by year, more constituents came on board and said, we will speak out.
It was reader boards, billboards, all kinds of business. So you couldn't go anywhere in town without seeing that, and you over and over and over again.
It's a remarkable move. Lucy, we have just a little time left. I want to come back to you. And you've been on the board for years, and you're so dedicated. And you'll be back with us again next week. But as another person who's a long-term board member and worked on this, give us your reaction to all the things that we've talked about concerning the tearing of the compound down, the court victory, and all of those things.
There was a lot of emotion around that for me. There was the relief that it was gone, and there was looking at that tower, thinking about when the Keenans were there and being viewed from the tower, and all of the victims of the many crimes that occurred. So there was sadness around that. There were just a lot of emotions around all of this. It's been a great relief to not have that constant irritation.
Also, 2000, 2001 were just filled with like the trial and then the victory and all the things we've talked about today. It was probably the most emotional time for us, 2000, 2001, although in the 80s there was a real emotional time with the bombings. Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing this story. I think it's a remarkable story of the 25-year history of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations and all others and organizations that join with them. Hope you'll be with us again next week, and we're going to do program number 9. We're getting fairly close to the end of this. We've got to continue through the years 2002 through 2005, and we want to honor the task force with these programs. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.